Oxford from the inside. The good, the bad, but always the truth.
Hello and welcome to Oxford from the Inside. The good, the bad, but always the truth. I'm your host Ellis, and today I'm joined by the lovely Bradley. Brad, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Bradley. I am a recent graduate from Trinity College, Oxford, and I studied history.
Lovely. So today you're joining us to talk about what it's like to apply and study at Oxford when you come from a northern state school. So would you like to start by telling us a bit about your background?
Yeah, so I went to a state school in the northeast called St Robert of Newminster Catholic School. It's in a little in a town called Washington, which is part of the Sunderland area, which is where I'm from. And I did, for my A-levels, I did history, English literature, and I did geography. And so kind of was never really certain about wanting to go to Oxford, I suppose. It was more of a dream, I suppose, something that I'd been told about that really clever people went to, and that it was probably something that, I might get into, a good uni, but not an Oxford uni. So then, getting told that I might have the potential to be able to apply, and then eventually getting in is something that kind of took me aback a little bit when I was at school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, that kind of answers like why Oxford. But yeah, so I mean, why did you want to study history?
Well, that's a funny one actually, because I was kind of torn between history and geography, and people, being someone that had been through school and chose the subjects that he chose, because, and I did AS maths as well. Yeah, I know. It wasn't for me, believe it or not. I was I quite enjoyed keeping my options open, I suppose, is the best way I can put it. And I was torn between history and geography, and I was probably just as good at both of them, although my grades probably wouldn't suggest that in the end, but I enjoyed them both to the same degree. It's just that my history teacher ended up saying, hey, you could apply to Oxford. My geography teachers didn't. And I suppose that was the big difference, really, is that I got that initial enthusiasm from my history teacher, which is why it ended up being history, as well as, I enjoy history as well, of course.
Yeah.
I'd have to.
Yeah. Okay, so I suppose that kind of goes to show that, like, in sort of like state school backgrounds, like, I guess to an extent there's a sort of like almost hesitation to encourage people to apply. Would you kind of say that was the case?
It's an interesting one. My school was it's quite a good school for, I suppose, the area at large. It's usually one of the top ranked state schools in the area. And they do have a couple of teachers that went, or maybe I think one teacher that I can think of that went to Oxford, and who runs a kind of Oxford program of sorts, which isn't, necessarily representative of a lot of other state schools. And I can kind of, I can get on board with that. I understand that. But there was never really, there was always a push from teachers to say, what, if you make this decision, go for it. Absolutely. But there was also kind of, it wasn't smooth sailing, put it this way, from my teacher telling me at a year 12 opened parents' evening that, have you thought about applying to Oxford? It was Oxford, it wasn't Cambridge. Cambridge wasn't mentioned, funnily enough. I don't know the specifics of that one, but and the history department are incredibly supportive, and so are a lot of other departments. But I remember my head of sixth form being really supportive, particularly because in year 13, in my second year of sixth form, I kind of had a bit of trouble trying to get the correct grades to actually even apply to Oxford in the first place, which was a real struggle for me. Weirdly enough, I thought it would just be plain sailing, and I eventually finagled my way and got it sorted. But something that I know plagues a lot of different people, and is, I know, an issue, because the idea that teachers inflate grades and whatever is strictly not true, because teachers want students to actually achieve what they're capable of and don't want to kind of crush them if they kind of set too high targets or whatever. So I kind of had a little bit of struggle getting just to the 3 A's that was needed.
Yeah. How did you find the application process as a whole?
It was really weird, actually. Oh God, personal statements. I must have gone through, and this sounds scary, actually, just before I mention this to anyone who's listening, is that it sounds terrifying that I went through about 20 or 30 kind of just different drafts of my personal statement. But probably the last 20 of those 30 or whatever were me changing a comma here, or me changing an "a" to a, something else that was an active or active tense or whatever it was. It was minute things that eventually I kind of edited myself into the ground to this robotic kind of sounding personal statement, which isn't always the best. So I ended up reverting to an earlier draft just because I spent so long. Just every day I would go on it in my break time, in my lunchtime, just be like, oh, I'll change that. I'll get this person to proofread it. And, too many hands spoil the broth, I suppose. So I ended up kind of just getting on with it. And then with the rest of the process, I had to do the History Aptitude Test, the HAT, which was, before it was reformed, which is, it's a lot nicer now than it was when I did it, but it was still a bit terrifying. And I just I was remarkably unprepared, I suppose, for that. Kind of revised all of my A-level work and then kind of relied on myself to hopefully just regurgitate something in the exam. I mean, I talked about Russian kings that didn't exist. I talked about all sorts of different stuff that I know in hindsight was factually wrong. I went outside and checked my phone. I was like, please say there was a Tsar Nicholas III of Russia. Nope, there wasn't. And so I'll never forget that feeling of coming out of that exam thinking, oh God, that could have gone better. But then after that, I then had to do written work, which I ended up kind of cannibalizing my coursework to do and get marked for history, which was probably put me a bit behind in terms of doing the coursework. So that's something that for anyone who's doing kind of an essay-based subject or wants to apply for that, I suppose is something to look out for. And then, of course, you kind of get to interviews. And I really just took everything as kind of, this is just the next step along the way. This is just, I've just got to do this, and then I might get in. Just got to do this. And, I was saying to myself in kind of, September, doing personal statements, saying, oh, if I get past the initial application, I'll get in. I'm good at interviews. I'll get in. And I got to interviews. I was like, I'm not getting in. I'm not getting it. So the kind of, almost my own just confidence, which was probably totally unjustified, kind of helped me carry me through. But it's a terrifying process, and without kind of support, I think from specifically one or two of my history teachers, I don't think I would have kind of had any idea what I was doing whatsoever. So I was really fortunate.
Yeah. And did you get any kind of like Oxford specific support? Like, were you practicing the like History Aptitude Test before, or did like mock interviews or anything like that?
Let me think. We did do a little bit of mock interview practice, but it was like an hour after school one evening. We did a student swap with another school that had some students going to interviews, and the staff members there interviewed us and vice versa at our school. So we did that, but that was kind of, I think it was like 20 minutes talking to another history teacher, who talked about a bunch of stuff that I just should have known but didn't know, and not even subject specific stuff, just kind of just generalized historiography and stuff. And it was probably a bit scary actually, but I just chatted away, and there wasn't really much feedback, to be honest. I don't remember it as being quite useful. And then in terms of Oxford preparedness, like for the actual interviews, I remember getting sent away with a stack of books this big by my history teacher saying, "I'll read these on the train." I thought,
oh my God,
all right, cool. Read like the introduction to most of them, and then got the interview, and they didn't ask me anything about any of them. They asked me about the stuff that I'd written in my personal statement, which makes sense. Why would they ask me about this other stuff? But not really any kind of I didn't do any practice tests of the hat. I just I looked at the exam, to be honest, the night before, did a few practice questions, and then just kind of crossed my fingers and went in, hope for the best. And obviously it must have gone okay, at least.
Yeah, clearly. Did you have any reservations when you were like applying and going through the whole process?
At interviews, yeah, I did, definitely. Interviews the most intimidating time, I think. It was quite different because I was doing all remotely. I mean, we're all used to doing stuff remotely nowadays, but it felt really kind of like I wasn't actually applying. I sent a written work off to a random email address at a different college that said, "Oh, thanks, we'll give this to tutor." Okay, fine, whatever. And then, I sent my personal statement off through UCAS, and it was just like, oh, everyone's doing this. It's just what you do. It's not an application. It's funny. Some people, a lot of adults compare it to like job applications or whatever, but I wouldn't say it's like a job application. It's kind of, they're a lot more personal. It feels a lot more kind of robotic when you're doing an application for university, even not necessarily just Oxford or Cambridge, if you dare. So.
Yeah, I know, I would completely agree with that. Like, you kind of are just a face behind, well, you're not even a face, you're just your personal statement and predicted grades.
You're just a number on a spreadsheet, probably just kind of feel like you're just sending stuff off, and it's probably a bit scary. When you get to interviews, it then suddenly turns real and there's real life people. I remember I just had no concept of Oxford, and all my friends, I'm from the northeast of England. I'm 250 miles away from Oxford. Everyone say, "Oh, you're going to turn out posh. You're going to come back posh. You're going to this and that. They're all posh down there. They're all going to bully you." There's all that kind of rhetoric that goes around. And I went down thinking, "Oh, this is all rubbish." But it must have been sat at the back of my mind, because I remember I interviewed at Brasenose, and in their JCR, in their common room, they have a pool table. Some of the helpers were playing pool a bit. Some of the candidates were playing pool, and they were being entertained. I didn't really socialize during my interviews. I kind of hid away a little bit.
Yep.
Sat on my laptop, just doing stuff for college or whatever. And I remember I on the one time that I wasn't there's a guy who stood speaking very received pronunciation, very well spoken. And he was stood with black trousers on, with a white shirt and like a black waistcoat on. I thought, the college employing, and he kept going into the pool sockets and putting the balls back for them when they potted or whatever on the table. I thought, is the college employing someone to sit here and to pick pool balls? Is it this kind of level? And that was just part of my insecurity, not knowing what was going on. And yeah, I asked this guy, you employed here? And got an emphatic no. I'm here to interview for PPE. And we just went, oh, okay, right. And
oh my god,
proceeded to go and hide back in my room and not talk to anyone.
Oh wow.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
was it. I wish that wasn't true. I wish I was making that up for entertainment purposes.
So I guess kind of in a way it shows that maybe your like preconceptions of what Oxford was like sort of had that impact on you, where you see someone in like a waistcoat and you're like
Well, I was just kind of very, very focused on kind of what I was doing. I was a bit arrogant, to be honest, almost. I mean, I spoke about how I was like, oh, I'll get in if I get to interviews. I was trying to keep that arrogance up just because it was a facade of confidence, which I think people go one way or the other when they do interviews. Having worked with students on interviews, it's kind of very much, oh, I'm really confident, or actually, I'm just not as confident, and all these people who are really confident are just terrifying. And often the people who are confident, like me, are the people who are just terrified as well. So it's not something, it's something you will inevitably get, intimidated by if you do go for an interview, but it's part and parcel, unfortunately. And the motivations end up false anyway, I suppose, really. Everyone was lovely to me and just asking where I was from, was just interested more than anything.
Oh, I remember at my interviews, I got asked by someone what school I went to, which is like the worst thing you can get asked. And I was like, you won't have heard of it. It's a state school in Manchester. Like, I don't know.
I fortunately never got asked. Well, I probably didn't get asked that question because I wasn't around enough. And that's my interview experience is probably skewed by that. The only time I socialized was when I was preparing for my interview, and I was very much just sat kind of psyching myself up, like wearing nice clothes, being like, right, okay, come on, think about history. What do we need to learn about history? And it was just, and it was ridiculous. It was like I was going out for a Champions League final or something. It was, but hey, it made me feel better. And everyone I met there, that guy who I got talking to at the pool table he was very well spoken. I assumed he was just going to be from one of the home counties. He ended up being from Yorkshire. He went to a private school in Yorkshire, and he was talking to me about York. You know, I have family in York, so I talked to him a little bit about that. And he ended up being a really nice guy. I never caught his name. I don't remember who he was. I don't know whether he got in. I never encountered him afterwards, but it was nice, and it put me a bit more at ease that don't make kind of that kind of those prejudices go both ways, I suppose, sometimes, in that kind of you can set yourself up for just being even more terrified than you probably need to be. And I think I did that a little bit. So that was getting brought down to earth in a funny but a meaningful way.
Yeah. And as well, like you said, I think it's important to remember that people, like everyone who goes despite like background, is going to be nervous at interviews. Like there's probably few people that go and like, you know, are completely self-assured.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are some people like that, but I mean, from experience and from what I've seen and from what I've heard, I mean, those people don't necessarily always get in, even if they are for themselves. Some, you know, tutors value substance, and substance doesn't necessarily come through in confidence. So if you're not confident, don't worry, you're fine.
Yeah, very true, very true. If you were going to go back through the whole application process again, is there anything that you would do differently?
Revise for the hat better, yes. Not do my personal statement as much, definitely, and not ask as many people to look over it, because I ended up that I'd sent my personal statement at different stages of the drafts to 3 different people who'd all come back with different things that were wrong with it in the same sections, and I just thought, oh my god, this is I can't, and I was trying to consolidate all that into one. It just wasn't working. Interviews. I would have changed the train ride. The train ride was long. It was a 5-hour train ride for me cross country. Yeah, and that was back when we had to pay for it, I think. Whereas I think Oxford colleges now, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think Oxford colleges now do reimburse for travel expenses, which is nice. So that wasn't pleasant. But I can't. I maybe would have tried. I don't know. It's a funny one. I was kind of really, really trying hard and almost giving it large at school, kind of saying, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna get in. Yeah, of course, I'm Bradley. Of course, yes." Trying to be arrogant, bit kind of giving myself that confidence. But then at the same time, I was working really hard and also not working really hard on different things, and there's a lot going on. And it's mad now if I think about it, because I had a lot of different things going on at the time, but it like more than I have now. But I get more kind of like, oh my god, everything's going on all at once now than I was back then. So it's an odd time to look back on, really, because I think you just get on with it because everyone's getting on with it at school or college, and you get a bit of that camaraderie sometimes, which is helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And in looking back, what would you say your favourite thing was about studying at Oxford?
It's hard studying at Oxford. I'd say I went into Oxford sincerely believing, as harsh as it is, because Ellis, you're really one of my good friends, that I just wasn't going to make any friends at Oxford. Not by me just not being able to make friends. I thought, oh, I can make friends easy. But that I just didn't think I'd come out of Oxford with long-term friendships, and just thought, oh, I'll just go in, I'll do my 3 years, I'll get out, and then I'll come back home to the Northeast where I know everyone and where it's kind of just, it's my place. I'm just going to Oxford just to get the degree. I think the social aspect was the best part about studying at Oxford, and kind of making friends from all over the place with shared interests. As well as actually, when I envisaged me going and not having any friends, I envisaged myself just enjoying the academia and sitting in the libraries, and there, you know, I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would when I first, which is probably impinging on one of your questions already, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would initially. because the work was just hard and I was just hammering stuff out, and it was a bit stressful. But I did end up finding times when I was sat in the library really just enjoying whatever book I was getting into. I remember one specific moment at the end of second year feeling like, yeah, I'm an Oxford student. I'm studying in the Bodleian Library. I'm so cool. And it was just really nice. So the environment is lovely to study in Oxford as well. That's definitely a big plus. The libraries are gorgeous for weird reasons, if you're a nerd like me.
Would you say you suffered from imposter syndrome? And like, if you did, was there kind of like a point where you actually thought, okay, yeah, like this is my place, like I deserve to be here?
I think I suffered with imposter syndrome kind of, it kind of ebbed and flowed, I think. I remember getting a bad exam result back at the end of first year, and you probably remember me absolutely spiraling out of control. And that was when imposter syndrome really hit me, because previous to that, I just thought, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just normal. And then I thought, I'm not normal. And I kind of went off into an absolute tailspin. I ended up pulling it out the bag in the actual exam for that exam I got a bad result on. So it was fine. But that kind of then made me realize, oh, okay, right, be a bit more wary of Oxford. So maybe it kind of encouraged that in me, just because I was being too laid back with work, admittedly. And I did really do terribly in that exam. Having reread it, it was terrible. But then over the course of second year, I mean, it kind of just ebbed and flowed. I mean, the middle term is always, for me, the toughest term, just because it's kind of like there's a lull in what's going on. Everyone's very tired. It's the middle of the year. It's still, it's winter, but without Christmas. That's the worst part. There's no festivity. There's no excitedness for it to get snowy again. It's like, oh God, just get us through this. Get spring, get summer, come on. So I'd struggle then with a bit of imposter syndrome, and my work would probably affect because of my mood. But I suppose it kind of just came out whenever I was under stress with academic work. In terms of my belonging at Oxford, I knew I belonged, but it was whether I was up to the standard that was expected of me. And I've graduated now and I've got my results, and I ended up being really happy with what I got. So I can't, more happy than I thought I was going to be when I was waiting, panicking, getting my results. So imposter syndrome, definitely. But it's about kind of almost toning it out a little bit, which is a really difficult skill to learn. And in my case was sometimes just not possible. So it's just kind of being able to ride the highs and paddle like mad amongst the lows.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It is tough, and I think I agree that the middle term is just always that point where everything just seems really bleak, because the first term back, whether it's the start, like just the start of your degree, everything's really new and exciting, or especially the start of second year, like you're all fresh. For a lot of people, you just don't have exams that year. And then
it's a funny one. It's kind of, you get back at second year and you're ready to see all your friends again. Oxford now, so you can go all the cool places. Where in first year, you're a bit like, oh, I don't really know Oxford, but now you've explored Oxford and it's great. But then kind of our second term of second year was just, if I describe it, it's like first term is like, in terms of, I always associate with the weather for some reason. I don't know why, but it's kind of like, I always imagined it being like snowy in first term, just kind of like autumnal snowy. And then like summer, Trinity term, third term is like, oh, it's sunny, it's a few showers here and there, but it's mainly just sunny, and Oxford gets blazing hot compared to the north, which is something that you should be aware of. Take sun-cream for third term. It's something I learned. But then second term is just slush. That's just all it's just slush. It's just like the slush on the pavement. It's terrible. It's just annoying. It's just something you've just got to get on with, and you're probably going to get your feet wet, but you just got to deal with it.
In fact, I remember in our second term of our first year where there was a really bad like snowstorm for a week, which, Trinity looked beautiful in the snow, but I remember seeing you fall over in the snow in front of the Trinity Chapel, which
Yeah,
It's probably my lasting memory of you.
Yeah, that was a pretty shocking day actually. I was soaked. I was wearing like a wool coat and a wool jumper as well. I was just drenched. It was just it was grim. But hey, at least I've given you a positive memory to remember some of them.
Yeah. So to move on, in your second year, you were Access Officer at Trinity. Can you tell us about that role?
Yeah. So I was JCR Access Officer for the year, starting in January, ending in December, and most of my role was to do with trying to work with the Access Department at Trinity centrally, and work with Hannah and Emma, our head of Access and our Access Officer there, to try and engage more state school students, and particularly within our link region of the Northeast, which is where I'm from, which is where my passion for Access really came from. To not only apply to Oxford and Cambridge, but also to apply to higher education in general, and to just give tips and just to try and encourage people that often the stigmas that they've heard, the same ones that I heard, but which I was too cocky and arrogant to try and listen to, aren't real. And so I suppose unfortunately for me, I was that arrogant, but it's to try and encourage people that there is a place for them at Oxford, and to suggest that as Oxford evolves, we need people from more diverse backgrounds, because we don't want to just have a singular view of the world. We don't have a mono view of the world. We want to be able to see it from lots of different perspectives. We want to have everyone's input on things. And so my work involved with Trinity specifically. We created a program by which we have ambassadors now, officially paid ambassadors, which is quite good. And I know they've been doing fantastic work on virtual open days recently. Of course, with the current situation, it's been a little bit different to do Access work, but I know that they've been doing a lot of different things, like podcasts. There's a YouTube channel, of which Trinity has a YouTube channel, but of course, I mean, most, if not all, Oxford colleges have YouTube channels at this point. And there's lots of videos, some of which are starring me, which is fantastic, and they're just useful as tools by which people can engage with Oxford and understand the process. I gave a brief overview of the admissions process rather, but I mean, you can get a bit of a better input into that from there as well. So it's quite a multifaceted role, really. I did an awful lot of different things, from kind of rewriting parts of bursaries at Trinity to make the language more accessible and more so people would apply to them, and other things like that. So there's a lot of different stuff that I got along with Julia, who is my partner in crime, doing it. But I'd hope that we left Trinity in a far greater place. But almost the kind of the tragedy of the Access Officer is that once you get from kind of most Access Officer first or second year, but once you move up a year, the years below you tend to be more state school heavy, and you end up being your year ends up being seen as part of the problem. Which is dragging the statistics down, which is dragging the kind of the representativeness of Oxford down, which is really sad actually, because I had that exact same perspective when I was in first year as well. So what can you do?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a problem, like especially in Trinity, which when we were in first year, I think that was when the Access reports came out that showed Trinity as being one of the worst state school accepting colleges by a lot.
Well, we've flown up those rankings now. Actually, we've I think there's something nearly 60% of students, whereas we were below 50%. I think in my first year, which is a staggering change. Mm-hmm. Really. But like many things, it's kind of, I say generational, but I mean kind of year by year, in terms of you get 1 year that is weighted badly and 1 year that is weighted well, and then it just, as you progress, slowly but surely there is progress being made. Mm-hmm. And it's a fantastic thing, and all credit goes to the Access Department at Trinity, who are doing a fantastic job as well as the Access Officers at the minute, who are JCR Access Officers, who are also continuing the good work me and Julie left.
How would you say that like Oxford in general can improve inclusivity for like state school applicants?
I think a lot of it comes down to their exposure, people's exposure to Oxford. This is a good little story, a little analogy, but I refereed for school football teams and stuff when I was in sixth form, and I had quite a good relationship with the head of PE, who went to Durham, and he really encouraged me to apply to his college. He encouraged me to apply Cuthbert's at Durham, and I didn't, and he was really angry at me. But and I told him, oh, I got my offer in January. When I got my offer through, I said, oh, I got my offer, sir. And he said, oh, brilliant. And he said, you'll break the Northeast trap. And I said, what? He said, the triangle trap. So he said, because he's a Yorkshireman, he came from York. I think it was I can't remember where it was now. Anyway, not important. And he said, oh, I came up from Durham to do university at Durham, and I've never left, because, you know, between Newcastle, Sunderland, and Durham, there's kind of, it's almost a little mini microcosm universe. There's no reason for people to leave, and there's kind of a little trap there for people. And it's true. There is kind of, in the Northeast specifically, it's a bit what my dissertation was about, weirdly enough, is that there's kind of not there's no push from the Northeast to go and see the wider world. There's not the accessibility in terms of, you know, transport, you know, costs, as I say, it costs £100 to get down on the train to Oxford, that kind of thing. It's incredibly expensive. And therefore, not many teams in the past, recruitment teams for Oxford and Cambridge, have made it up to the Northeast. And they're starting to increasingly do that as a result of kind of seeing the disparities, and to places like Wales and to Scotland as well. And Northern Ireland and Cornwall, and, you know, different, Norfolk, I think, as well, gets quite a bit, you know, different places that are far reaching. But it's just about getting greater exposure, because naturally colleges find it far easier just to kind of, you know, get on a £15 train into London and then be able to put on events galore in London. So that's the thing that I see as being the issue, is just to kind of get people exposed to Oxford and what Oxford's really like, because and have relatable people who care, do Oxford tours and whatnot. I mean, I applied to Brasenose, as I might have briefly mentioned, and that was because when I wanted to apply to Trinity, someone at Trinity who's now long gone, was doing tours on an open day, and said, oh, I got 5 A stars at A level, and I do chemistry here, and I'm going to get a first, and I went to this school. And I was thinking, oh my God.
So we've got time for one more question. And my question to you is, what advice would you give to people from the North who want to apply to Oxford?
The advice I always give whenever I do access stuff is, you've got 5 choices on UCAS. Make one of them a kind of, you know, not a long shot, but make it an aspirational choice. I mean, I applied to Northern unis, actually, funnily enough, despite Oxford's the only uni down south that I applied to. I applied to Oxford, Durham, Newcastle, York, and Northumbria as well. And so, yeah, just make one of your, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, I could apply to Oxford, maybe it's for me, just, you've got 5 choices. You're going to make 5 choices. I know for a fact that I never had any real intention of going to, no offense, great unis, but Newcastle and Northumbria were never really on my radar. They weren't anything that I was kind of like, oh, I'd like to stay there, because I'm in Sunderland. I live 15 miles away from Newcastle. I can drive there in 20 minutes. It's not interesting to me. York is slightly more interesting. Durham is just a really good uni, and I'm also 15 miles away, probably less than that, to Durham as well. But Durham being such a good uni, it's kind of on my doorstep. It would be kind of a, well, why not as well? But yeah, make sure you apply to kind of Oxford or Cambridge, or even if not, like, you know, apply to a good uni that you can have a go at, because Oxford's not gonna, you know, you're not gonna lose anything from applying to Oxford. Not gonna lose anything for going for the interviews, and you've got it all to gain. And if you're not willing to take a risk and kind of give it a go, you're never gonna find out whether you could have or not. And it's not, and people are afraid, especially at that age, and teachers specifically are afraid of putting you forward for it, because it's worried about, I had to get my English literature grade predicted grade change from a B to an A by the head of sixth form, because the deputy head of English shouted at me and told me that they didn't want me to be disappointed when I didn't get in. Interesting. And I was 2 marks off an A star in English literature. I was gutted. I could have rubbed that in their faces. But that's not the point. The point is that the teachers don't want to disappoint you. They don't want to make you feel terrible about not getting into a certain uni or about not doing a certain thing. So you've got to remember that this isn't really a rejection. It's not that you're not clever. It's just, quite more often than not, it's that Oxford has really specific ways of working and specific kind of ideas that they go by. They, in a tutorial, 1-on-2 or a 1-on-1 or whatever it is, you're expected to kind of talk, and that's how you learn. You learn by kind of orating what you're, and speaking aloud what you're saying and your thoughts and reacting on the spot critically. And for some people, that's just not how they learn, and that's fine. It doesn't mean you're not clever. I mean, I'm sure there is far cleverer people than me at history, who are in my academic year, who go to other unis, not even who just go to Oxford or Cambridge or wherever. It doesn't bother me about that, but it means that I'm glad I still went and gave Oxford a shot, even if I felt like at the time it was a bit of a long one. So that's my advice. Give it a go.
That's really good advice. That's wonderful. So so thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure.
Thank you to everyone who's tuned in. Make sure to check us out on YouTube at Oxford from the Inside, and we're also on Instagram and Facebook at Oxford from the Inside as well. So everyone take care and good luck with the start of the academic year. Bye.